Welcome to the Yankee and Canuck podcast, Best Picture Series, where we talk about all the Academy Award Best Pictures, past to present.
And I'm your host, a Yankee.
And I'm your host, a Canuck.
And today we're going to be talking about 1939's Gone with the Wind, the movie to win the 12th Academy Award for Best Picture. It won 8 out of the 13 nominations in its class. It is considered the highest grossing film of all time when adjusted for inflation. It sold a hell of a lot of tickets. It's based on a best-selling book, a really long one at that. What can be said about this film that hasn't been said? Well, let's just get the stuff out of the way that has been said. Brilliant performances, beautiful set designs, beautiful costume designs. It's framed beautifully. A tumultuous filming history behind it, too. There have been 3 directors coming in and out. A team of writers to take this 1,000-page plus book and distill everything into a 4-hour movie.
It's exactly it. It should be called Gone with 4 Hours.
Gone
with 4 Hours.
Gone with 4 hours.
Yeah.
And notably, one of the Academy Award winners, Hattie McDaniel, won the Best Picture for playing Mammy. So when the film premiered in Georgia, she was not allowed to attend the premiere for obvious reasons. And when it came to the Academy Awards, she was allowed to attend, but she had to sit in the back and wait for her turn to go up there.
Correct. Yeah, they gave her a small table in the back of the venue.
It's about 2 decades before the civil rights movement happened. So yeah, there was a lot of progress to be made.
Yeah, it was Jim Crow and segregation, and so definitely a classic movie for sure. I would say it's an important film, and it's in color too. The Technicolor.
It's also the first Best Picture winner to be in color.
Look at the colors.
Ooh, it's pretty. Well, the colors are pretty, I gotta say. So, all in all, after many years, is this film still really good? Or is it overrated? Well, before we get into all of that, I do want to say that in preparation for this, as usual, if you've been listening to our episodes, if there's a source material, I read it. This was daunting, to say the very least. This thing...
Quite a big book, I think, right?
It's a huge book. It's a really long book. The book, I think it's supposed to be 1,000 pages. The copy I ended up getting was close to 2,000 because I think the print was bigger, so it's easier to read.
Wow.
I will say, the first 400 pages of this thing, I was like, what? What's going on? Like, I knew what was going on, but I'm like, it keeps going and going. And I will say that very early on, I realized like the prose is actually really good. It's a really well-written book, but it wasn't really getting my attention too much. By the time it got to the 400-page mark, and the book is divided into 5 parts, about 63 or 64 chapters. But by the time we got to about part 2 of the thing, that's when it got really good. And I was like really getting invested. And I was like, ooh, now this is different. Unlike all the other books that I've read so far, with a couple of exceptions like It Happened One Night, All Quiet on the Western Front, which was based on a book, this is the first one where the source material is impeccably good. Like, the more I read, the more I got really invested, the more I really cared about the characters, the more I was laughing because it was genuinely funny at times. It was charming. It was endearing. I was really, by the end of the whole thing, like, almost on the verge of tears. It was a very good book. But, and we haven't gotten to this part yet, what is the whole thing about? Well, it's about a bunch of plantation owners that are told they can't have slaves anymore, and they go to war over it, and they lose, and they cry, boo-hoo-hoo.
Yeah, it's basically about a whiny racist Southern Princess Leia and a profiteering racist asshole Han Solo competing to find out who's the more toxic person in their twisted romance. Essentially.
All right, in all seriousness, it's about a Southern belle, Scarlett O'Hara, who lives through the Civil War, Reconstruction periods, trying to get her life back on track while dealing with tumultuous romances and famine. Yeah, if anything, given the retrospective of the film, at the time, of course, it was very successful, very popular, both the book and the movie upon release. Yeah. But now, through especially modern eyes, people take a look at it and they're like, what the hell?
That's true. I mean, it's definitely still immensely popular. I mean, you look up any list of greatest movies of all time, you're going to find it on there. But it still, has its controversies, and it still has its popularity as well. And they've re-released it, so many times over the decades, right?
Yeah, definitely. We're going to get into it a little bit more later. But to encapsulate it, it's an extremely racist film. The black characters in particular are not treated with any grace whatsoever. They're like Mammy, Uncle Tom stereotypes. As a matter of fact, one of the characters is called Mammy, and she won the Academy Award, as I mentioned earlier. As a matter of fact, I think it's even worse in the book. So they tried to do their best in this film to tone down the racial insensitivities, but even then, it still drew the ire from, people that weren't white, basically.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, it's a big budget racist film. Let's be honest, but it is well made. It's an important film in many ways, and of course, there's millions of people who like this movie, and millions of more people who will enjoy it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying this film. You can enjoy it, of course, and also be critical of some of the aspects, and acknowledge the other things, and speak up on those things. And you got to take a nuanced approach, right? So, yeah, I mean, some people are just blindly praising the film without taking a look at it and the problems with it, and then of course there's going to be some people say that there's no issue with it whatsoever. That's just the way it is, and like, I mean, some stuff was wrong then, it's wrong now, and you got to look at it in a certain way and call out the BS too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's fine to be critical, but to still like certain aspects of the film. And there's some people that, no matter what, they're always going to dislike the film, and that's totally fine too. I mean,
yeah.
people are not entitled to like or dislike anything. If at the very least, though, at least try to understand why the film is as celebrated as it is.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the film itself was quite an achievement. I mean,
Yeah,
so
it
no
is.
doubt about it.
It's a technical wonder in a lot of instances, especially with the color aspect, the Technicolor process.
Color, yep.
Especially like this is around the same year Wizard of Oz came out, and it had a similar process to it as well. But I think most of that film was color, whereas all of this film is in color.
Yeah, I mean, the Technicolor definitely is arguably the one of the biggest factors that drove this movie to where it went. I mean, it really brought out a lot of that realism with the colors and made it vivid, and so there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, no doubt. But going with the content of both the film and the book, it all comes back to Margaret Mitchell, the author of Gone with the Wind. So to quickly touch on her, I mean, to really understand why this piece of work came out the way it did, well, she was raised in a way where it's just like, some could say old-fashioned, I guess. I don't know. Like, she already had a racist points of view growing up. Allegedly, while attending a college seminar of some kind, she had to get out of the classroom because she was protesting the fact that there was a black student there. Allegedly. Wow. I don't know if that's 100% accurate. A historian has made mention of this, but her own family refutes the claim, so who knows? But over time, towards the end of her life especially, she ended up writing checks to black doctors who were attending medical school. So if anything, what you could probably take a look at her life is that she started out one way, incredibly prejudiced, just having this particular point of view, carrying it all the way to her writing this book. But then towards the end of her life, deciding, you know what, this is not the right way to go about life. This is not the right way to go about judging people. I need to turn a new lease on life, I guess you could say, and look at things from another perspective, all the way until she got, tragically hit by a car and died. That's just one aspect to look into it. H.P. Lovecraft is also said to be very xenophobic and horrible and racist and all that stuff. And that's,
sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And that's in his writings. But towards the end of his life, he ended up having a different perspective on life. Sometimes people are just dead set in their ways, and sometimes people do go through a character growth over time. They see something or they experience something, and then challenges them to look at their life in a different kind of way.
Exactly, yeah. And oftentimes it's presented in a story, in film, or in a novel, or within the characters. So
yeah,
we see that all the time, right?
Exactly, but not to make excuses for the content in both the film and the book. But there is somewhat of an explanation as to why things turn out the way they do.
So basically, what you're saying is Margaret Mitchell is a reverse Atticus Finch?
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Oh, yeah, 100%, with an extra dose of racism. Yeah, so when it comes to the author, a lot of her prejudiced views ended up making her way in the book because of her own life experiences. And you can kind of actually see that in the book itself, too, because Scarlett O'Hara in the book is a very pampered, spoiled brat. Unlikable, selfish, does what she can to get ahead. A lot of that is in the film, too. By the end, she softens her stance just a little bit. She becomes more understanding, more empathetic. She has a renewed interest in life, a different perspective on life. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of it at the beginning is wine, and just, a whole lot of character flaws. And but there definitely is some character development in the film, which is appreciated.
Yeah, at the very least. And Vivien Leigh played her brilliantly. She was great in the role. She's very beautiful on top of that. So I think she was perfect. In reading the book, having saw the film the first time and not really understanding what I was watching, I was picturing Vivien Leigh all the way to the end. She was just perfectly cast. And who else was perfectly cast? Clarke Gable as Rhett Butler. He was as described in the book, through and through, even down to the way he acted. It's almost as if the author saw him in a movie and kind of in her mind made this character in his likeness with his mannerisms. That's just what it read like to me.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did a good job. I think for the most part, I think he did a better job in movies like Mutiny on the Bounty. Not just saying that because I like that film. I think it's just a more technical performance, and more memorable in many ways, other than a few lines in this movie.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's forgettable in this film, to be honest, with the exception of a few scenes. And honestly, I always said that he's a very good actor. Obviously, he's the biggest actor at that time,
Oh, yeah.
superstar at that time. I personally don't think he's a great actor. I think there were so many other better actors at that time as well, but he's crazy consistently good in all the movies I've seen him in. And we've seen him in quite a few films now, and I've seen him in movies in addition to the ones we've covered, and he's like really consistently good. And so, but yeah, compared to Mutiny and maybe even It Happened One Night, I don't think this was that great of a performance. It wasn't bad writing; it was good, but you know.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the writing. Because again,
Yeah,
a bunch of writers
that's fair,
came
yeah.
in and kind of hacked the book up. And let's just be honest, a really long book like that,
Yeah.
the fact they got it down to 4 hours, that's pretty impressive. But when you watch the
Right.
film and you don't know much about it, I was like, okay, a lot of stuff is happening, but I don't know what's going on. I know generally there's a civil war happening. A lot of Confederates are losing. Then the Union takes over, and then the Reconstruction period happens. Generally, in those order of events, they happen like that, but they also happen pretty quickly, and you don't get a proper sense of how the characters are dealing with the situation and how it affects them overall. And when you read the book, obviously, because it's longer and more time can be afforded to it, you could understand, a lot of the characters' motivations, why they do certain things. There's a lot more time dedicated to certain events. So when I saw the film, I was like, oh, okay, I get that part. Oh, yeah, they combined a couple of things there. Oh, they cut that out entirely. No, that doesn't make any sense now. I was doing that a lot, all the way to the end. So I was just like, I mean, I commend the writers for doing the best they could, but at the same time, it still wasn't good enough, in my opinion. Especially, the best parts of the book are the ones between Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. They have the best chemistry in the book. They are always going at it. They're always insulting each other. They're always trying to one-up each other. They're always scheming. They're always trying to do something, whereas backstab a friend or take over a business, get money, kill someone if they have to survive. They're always doing something individually, and together they're always bickering, and they're always trying to one-up each other. And that is so good. But in the movie, you really don't get a whole lot of that, except towards the end.
Towards the end, you do, yeah.
Towards the end, you get that, and it's more faithful to the book towards the end somehow. But in the first half of the film, I would say, it's not that... They're bickering, obviously, but it's not as good as in the book. There are a lot of great comebacks and lines in the book that are not adapted to the screen. And whatever is actually adapted from the book, it's kind of butchered, in my opinion. So it's like, you can sense there's something there, but it's not fully fleshed out. And that kind of disappointed me to an extent.
It was one of those movies where the producers and writers kind of messed it up, not paying enough attention to the source material, or...
Probably. I mean, or it's really a time crunch because they really fit a lot of the main stuff that happens in the book in the film, especially a lot of the love triangle stuff. Like the main thing is Scarlett O'Hara's with Ashley Wilkes and Rhett Butler. Then she also marries a guy called Frank Kennedy. There's a lot of other romantic entanglements that happen throughout the book. It's a soap opera, as you mentioned.
Yeah, her first husband died in the first few minutes, right?
Yeah, Charlie.
Yeah, he had pneumonia from the measles, it said in the movie. And that's it.
Pneumonia and the measles, and then he died. And he's kind of a goofball. That's her first husband. And he's kind of like a, howdy, Miss Scarlett. You're very pretty. He's like one of those guys. Yeah, he goes to the war, he dies as he does, and then later she marries a 60-year-old. In the book he's like 60. I don't know how old he's supposed to be in the movie, but Frank Kennedy, he runs a store and a sawmill. Scarlett marries him for those things and ends up running them herself, and she becomes a really successful businesswoman. That part is not really in the movie. I don't think you get a sense that she's a business owner at all. Am I wrong?
Not really, no. I mean,
You just know that
maybe
maybe she's
toward
helping with stuff.
yeah, and yeah. I mean, yeah, especially with the property and after her dad passed, right, and
Yeah,
then fell off the
Gerald.
horse, and
Well, first it's
like,
the plantation, and after the war ended, she goes
yeah,
back, or during which she goes back.
Tara, right? I think
Tears
plantation
the
was called. Yeah,
plantation, yeah.
yeah,
So it's in a state of immense disrepair, but it's up to
yeah.
her to turn the tables and reconstruct it back into its old former shape, get her old slaves back, or at least the ones that are willing to work with her. Even when they're no longer slaves, they're just like very loyal to her and they stick around and help around. And her other friends, such as Ashley, her friend Melanie, who's played by Olivia de Havilland. And that's her first big job, running the plantation. Then she inherits the store. Then she inherits the sawmill, and she becomes a very successful businesswoman, at least in the book. So another thing I forgot to mention, and when it comes to the book, is that where there's not a lot of representation in terms of like, minorities, non-white people and all that stuff, there's a lot of feminist representation in this one. You could tell that the book was really about a woman who's told in society, you got to be a certain way. You got to be a proper lady. If your man can't provide, well, I guess you have to starve, because that is the proper way to go about it. A lady does not run her own business. A lady does not run her mouth. And what Scarlett O'Hara does in the beginning, what does she do? She runs her mouth. She does not care. She doesn't care about societal niceties or any of that stuff. She hates everyone that stands in her way. She talks back to all of her husbands, including Rhett, who she eventually marries as her third husband. But Rhett is at odds with her all the time, so he's able to tangle with her. He's also very successful in his own right. He gets his money through improper means. He's essentially a traitor because he worked with both the Union and the Confederacy, and he worked with shipping supplies, infantry supplies, food, and all that stuff. But during that whole course, Scarlett does what she can to survive, and that's how she survives. But in the book, it's like, you can't do that. You're not a proper woman if you do that. And all the town hates her for it. But, again, Scarlett doesn't care. She's like, listen, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And
Exactly. Yeah.
because as said in the movie, which is also in the book, she goes, as God as my witness, I will never go hungry again, which is a very famous line in the film.
Very famous line. Yep.
It's a often repeated line in the book also, because it's really about just that. Listen, she has nightmares about going hungry again. She has nightmares of starving, losing her plantation, losing all the people in her life that mean anything to her. So it's a constant theme once she gets to that point, and that drives her to become the very best person she can be. But it's at a great cost. And as we see in the film, she does have a family, but it falls apart in the end because for this and that and the other.
What if in that scene when she had that monologue and said that, you see Rhett just show up in the corner, he's like, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Another famous line in the film, also in the book.
What was the other guy's name? Ashley, right?
That's the other main love interest.
The other guy, yeah. There was one line in the movie that was so annoying. It was, he says she wants to use prisoners for labor or something.
Yeah.
And then he's all like, no, that's not right. That's not right. And she's like, well, you had slaves. And then he's like, well, I would have freed them all, if the war hadn't already freed them, which is complete bullshit.
Yeah, I was going to say bullshit.
He literally went to war to keep slavery legal.
Which the book also kind of glosses over.
He's claiming he's going to free them. Like, what?
Yeah.
Give me a break, man.
I know. That was a bunch of crap. No, I agree. The book kind of glosses over that, and that's one of the biggest criticisms of the book. It's like, there's a lot of revisionist history in it, in the book itself, too.
Yeah, I mean, he even says, I think after that, I think it was right after that part, he says, essentially, he's like, basically saying slavery's okay because they weren't abused or anything, and they weren't miserable. They're happy. Look at them. So slavery's okay. And it's like, what?
Yeah, well, in the book, too, when it comes to that, I mean...
They
were basically saying like, well, they like being slaves.
Oh man. Yeah.
And I'm like, what? There's a lot of unflattering stuff pertaining to that.
I mean,
You
it's a lot of nonsense, and I mean, it is a pretty ridiculous movie when you look at it in many ways.
I mean, here's a line from the book in regards to that too. Negroes were provoking sometimes and stupid and lazy, but there was loyalty in them that money couldn't buy. A feeling of oneness with their white folks, which made them risk their lives to keep food on the table.
Mm.
Sure, whatever.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, like I said, like all the white people that were Confederates are angels. Oh, they're misunderstood angels. Yes, they could be selfish and terrible, but they meant well. They meant well, and they had big lavish parties, and they love, you know,
Right.
they love hanging out and having good times. But those damn Yankees, they came and ruined everything.
Yeah.
That's the entire tone for the book. Like all the Yankees are bad.
Oh
All
yeah,
the
I mean, in the movie as well, the Union soldiers are all like evil, and and they're portrayed as all like have no morals or ethics, and the
yeah.
Confederates are all
Like I
great
said,
and whatnot. I'm like,
it's all racist fan fiction. That's just I mean, because if the book was more
it's
honest,
funny.
there would be more facets. There would be more dimension with
Right.
everyone. Because, yeah, there'd be some good, quote unquote, Confederate people. Sure, perhaps. Are there good Union people? Yeah, of course. Are there black people that wanted to still be with their slave owners? Of course. Were there ones that wanted to be free and went up and became, politicians or successful business owners in their own right, educated? Yes. But that second part is not represented in the book at all.
Mhm.
Like everyone is, in a sense, if you're not a white Confederate, you are a two-dimensional character in this book and frankly in the movie.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's all. I mean, it's deliberately done that way and portrayed in the film deliberately. So I mean, yeah. I mean, that's
it
among
is
the
what it is.
criticism, one of many.
But we went at length on the content of the book. Let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of the whole thing. White people to this day still revere the film as this classic. Like I
I
mentioned,
mean, yeah,
it's
it's definitely
it's a
Go
beautiful
ahead, Phil.
film. It's a beautiful film to look at.
Yeah, cinematography is great. I mean, it's obviously production's there. I mean, the sets, the scenes, the outdoor shots. I did want to talk about one scene. You remember the? I'm sure you do. The train yard sequence with all the bodies, the Confederate soldiers wounded.
Yeah, it's a very
So
famous scene in the film. Yeah.
super, yeah, super famous, very intense. I found it. So the first thing I noticed with that scene is, and I've seen this movie twice. So, and I remember that scene the first time watching this film, but it is so obvious they used so many mannequins instead of extras. We've seen it in other movies like Wings, All Quiet. They literally had thousands of extras and stuff. In this film, for whatever reason, I could tell when the camera panned and you see all the bodies, it was very obvious to me that, in my mind, at least 50% of the bodies were mannequins with clothes on. It was so
Ooh.
obvious to me. I looked online, and it is over 50% of the bodies.
Oh,
Well
wow.
over 50% were mannequins. And so for me, it just stood out too much. And I was like, damn, they should have just got more extras instead of mannequins. I mean, I'm sure there's reasons why they weren't able to, but
Bro, you just
uh,
ruined that scene for me. Because when I saw that
Whoops.
scene, I was just like, "Oh, this is amazing! Look at all the extras." Then now you're basically saying half of those were dolls.
They just went to the local store and grabbed a bunch of them and
They cheaped
went down
out.
to town, grabbed the mannequins.
They cheaped out big time.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, it just was so obvious when I was looking at it, and then it's just like that thing's plastic, that thing's plastic, that thing's and yeah, I wish that they got more, extras. But it's a minor complaint.
It's a
Still a very
big-
good
It's
scene and
still
very important
it's
scene.
a big scene too. Like, oh my god. I mean, just like
It is, yeah, but I mean we've seen them use that. The other films we've covered with had thousands of extras and there's battle scenes and so I mean yeah, I mean it's hard to compare but this was a big budget film. So, I mean,
especially at the time, yeah. But I love that scene where they pan all. It starts with her, and then you push out. You see this large painting esque,
yeah,
super wide shot of everything. You see all the Confederate soldiers dying or being
yeah,
chaperoned off, and then it ends with the Confederate flag flapping beautifully.
It
on
does,
the
yeah.
left side. Yeah. So I mean, like it's as a scene, it's beautifully orchestrated. So
yeah.
that's
We're
why.
like, wow, this is a good scene, but boo that flag, boo.
Yeah, that flag sucks. Boo.
Y'all lost.
Yeah, y'all lost. My peanut butter that's been expired for the last 7 years lasted longer than the Confederacy.
Even the soundtrack was not bad too.
Soundtrack was very good too.
Yeah, yeah.
And as despicable as the characters are, the performances are still incredible, especially with the two main stars, but everyone plays their part really well, And, well, I can't say that they moved me as much as the characters in the book do. on certain ways. Everyone did the best they could with the material that they had, you know? That's the most I could say with that. Overall, as much as I really do enjoy the book could have been much shorter. It's, in some ways, the length is not justified, in my opinion. I think you could have cut it in half and you still would have had a really good book, given the content and everything.
I think the same could probably be said about the film. I don't know. It's, for me, it's too long. 4 hours.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of, I'm going to put it this way. I've seen this movie once before, and I only remember a little bit of it. A couple scenes, a couple lines for, obviously the ending, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Famous stuff like that.
Yeah.
A couple other scenes in the beginning I do remember watching once, and once again, seeing this movie now for the second and final time. I'm not going to watch this movie again. Let's be honest. And I'm probably going to forget a third of this movie, give or take. A lot of the scenes, a lot of the stuff, it's forgettable, in my opinion. The scenes, obviously, a lot of them are very memorable, but there's just so much in it, and it didn't need to be 4 hours. But then again, I guess maybe it needed to be because of the book, and I don't know.
Well, it needed to be true to form of the book. Even the author liked the interpretation in the film. She had some reservations with certain things that they did, but there's only so much you could do. When I finished reading the book, and certainly after the film, my takeaway from this, if you were to do this again, make it into a miniseries. This is more justifiable as a modern day miniseries.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
You would probably have to change certain things, though.
For sure.
Because, like I said, the characterizations are great. The characters sometimes are, not even sometimes, they're just evil characters. Because what's not portrayed in the film is the fact that a couple of the main characters joined the KKK, and there's some hanging happening, and there's some killing happening, and all this other stuff. And Rhett Butler ends up getting him off from a very lengthy prison sentence. And Rhett Butler himself.
I think in the movie, there's implications of that.
Oh, it's more explicit in the book because Rhett Butler kills a black man for just as much as talking back to a white woman.
Wow.
He's a despicable son of a bitch.
Yeah.
But despite all that.
Which we know from the movie as well. We know that.
Yeah. We can't, in the movie, but in the book, he's much more so
worse,
much worse. But I feel like, in spite of that, he's still very interesting. They're still very endearing characters. They're just, even when it comes to amoral characters, like completely immoral characters, they're still interesting. There's just something about them that makes you want to watch more. It's like Breaking Bad when you watch Walter White. He's a meth kingpin that sacrifices the safety of his family to get rich, to get power. But we're still pulled into that world. We're still rooting for him. You know what I mean? So
there's his transformation from Walter White to Heisenberg, and it becomes something totally, So something else, and was a point of no return, and just kind of
I understand with that character, there's more relatability to that character, but. That being said, though, the reason why we're hooked is because we're interested in seeing what they're going to do next. So if you were to do a mini-series of this, I would add a couple of extra characters and make some of the characters not as cartoonish in their depiction. I feel like if you had a couple of Union soldiers that were, not despicable, that they were, upright and they were trying to do the right thing, maybe immoral in some cases too, and vice versa, I feel like you'll have a very compelling miniseries because it does end in a way, and it ends the same way in the book where Scarlett, as I mentioned, she loses everything. She has a family. She loses everything. She loses her husband, Rhett Butler. She loses her only child. In the film, it's her only child. She actually has 3 in the book, but it's only Bonnie in this film, and she loses her best friend, Melanie. And her parents obviously die. So it's just like she's very much alone in the world. But at the very end, she's like, you know what? I'm going to go back to my plantation. I'm going to figure my stuff out. And I'm going to get Rhett back, my true love. Because he leaves her because he's like, I'm done with you, lady. You're crazy. And he bounces out of there. But she's like, I'm going to get him back. And because tomorrow is just another day. And
or a new day. New day.
Oh, sorry. Tomorrow is a new day. So if anything, it's just like, it ends on I wouldn't say a satisfactory note. It ends with her being like, you know what? I'm at my lowest point, but I'm determined to pick myself back up. And we see her
Yeah.
throughout in the film and the book. She's able to pick herself back up. So it
Yeah,
kind of
so we're convinced of it that she's going to be able to.
persevere.
She's done it before, yeah. Perseverance, and so yeah.
Yeah. So, but there was kind of an opening end to a sequel. Unfortunately, the author, well, depending on your perspective on the person, but she got run over by a car. And then, as I said, in her lifetime, this is her only book. But after her death, though, she did have an unpublished manuscript that was eventually published in 1996. It was basically a prototype of Gone with the Wind. It had soap opera stuff in there, love triangles and all that. So it just leaves me to wonder, if she were to still be alive, would she have made a sequel book? Possibly. I mean, but it's also possible she wouldn't have. Like Harper Lee, she never made a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird.
Yep.
So, I don't know. It's up in the air. So, all in all, does this film earn its reputation, or is it overrated?
Definitely overrated. I mean, as a film, sure, it's all right, but it's definitely overrated. I frankly don't give a damn about this movie. No, I mean it's still a classic, and classics are classics for a reason, and it'll always be highly regarded for its achievements in film, and it should be. I mean, honestly, it should be. It's not a bad movie or anything.
Yeah, but it is
but
too.
A lot of movies are overrated. So
yeah, but it is too long. Performances, as good as they are, they're not great. It's and in my opinion, too, just like after reading the source material, it just it kind of butchers the source material. It doesn't live up to it. However, compared to other Best Picture winners, I would say that this is probably one of the better ones, ultimately, of the ones that we've seen so far, out of the 12 now that we've seen.
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know if I would put it at top 5. Maybe I would have to reassess everything we've seen so far, but I would probably edge it towards the very low end of that, if anything.
Yeah, it's definitely not among my favorites. It probably would be among my least favorites, to be honest. But
it's got to be better than Broadway Melody.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, as a film and as it, and how I would rate it personally. But yeah, this is a good film in many ways. I just don't really like it. But,
yeah, no, that's fair. But
you'd have to be blind to not see the good work that they did, the technical work and the production and all that. So.
Yeah, the artistry in general is
Correct,
just
exactly.
Unparalleled in many ways. Yeah, and so ultimately, when we come to a rating, I think, all things considered, I probably would give this maybe a 6 out of 10. I would rate it lower, but there are good qualities to the film. And honestly, because the book is so good and I'm able to see a lot of the best qualities of that book in this film, it bumped up the rating a little bit for me. So ultimately, that's what I would grade it.
I'm going to go ahead and rate this a 6.5 out of 10. And I won't be watching it ever again.
The book, however, as long as it may be, I recommend reading that than watching the film. I would give the book actually probably a 9 out of 10, in spite of the fact it's disgustingly racist, in spite of the fact that the characters are despicable and horrible. It's a very entertaining book. It's a very endearing book. There are some interesting history bits in it, even if they may be complete bullshit. I don't know.
Right.
It just seemed very one-sided as I was reading it, but it's still very interesting. And plus, the historical aspect helps give a lot of weight to the character motivations. And you're able to say, like, okay, obviously this is why this happens. Obviously that's why that character does that. And when you take the historical aspect out, it's so rich with character. And you're just like, wow, okay, I could see why it's difficult to make this decision and that decision. I can see why this event happened. There's always something going on, and it doesn't feel manufactured. It feels like the author was very carefully plotting along the story as it went on, that it felt so real. And like I said, by the end, I was moved to almost tears. I was like, oh, this is so heavy. But I was still like, but these characters still are pieces of shit. So in spite of all that. But yeah, ultimately though, exactly. I mean, if you have a choice.
I do have one question for you though.
Yeah, go for it.
As a novel, how do you think it compares in terms of like the Great American Novel? How do you think it compares to things like The Great Gatsby or Invisible Man or whatever, Scarlet Letter, Moby Dick, and so forth?
When you say Invisible Man, you're talking about the H.G. Wells, you're talking about the Ralph Ellison one?
Ellison, yeah. Grapes of Wrath. You put it up there, or what? Is it kind of not really? Or
I've actually read most of those that you just mentioned, and also To Kill a Mockingbird, which is considered a great American novel. Mm-hmm. I would say that I think it does deserve to be put among those titles. I think it's not just a really well-written novel. It's also an important piece of history. It does capture a snapshot in history. As lopsided as it may be, as terrible as it may be, you still peer into the minds of people of that era, how they thought. And I feel like that's important. And, and when you get to The Great Gatsby, it's the same thing. You get into that Art Deco period and you just capture that moment in time and how people thought in that time. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in that book. To Kill a Mockingbird, very influential book. Civil rights era. It's just beautifully written. The book itself, the movie it's based on is incredible as well with Gregory Peck.
Correct. Yep.
So, I mean, like, and I'm more morally aligned with To Kill a Mockingbird than I am with Gone with the Wind.
Right.
That being said, they're both equally great books, and I do consider it to be one of the great American novels. Again, unlike pieces of crap like Grand Hotel, unlike Cimarron, which is the closest comparison to this book, Cimarron is a Western. Gone with the Wind is a Western. Cimarron,
right.
Is about a strong woman that works her way up to be a congresswoman. And Gone with the Wind is about a strong woman that works her way up to become a very successful, wealthy business owner. And in both instances, both women have their transformations towards the end. They're repulsive and racist in the beginning, but then they become more soft in the end. Scarlett, less so. But I would say, though, if I were to strictly compare those two Academy Award-winning pictures and books, Gone with the Wind is for sure a masterpiece. Like, the prose is beautiful. It's a literature masterpiece. Cimarron's a piece of shit that I wouldn't wipe my ass with.
Yeah.
So I would say, out of all the adaptations so far, this is the very best one, hands down. Even if the actual film is not that good, it is the best adaptation, best picture winner so far.
Fair. Yeah. Fair. I mean, you would know because you've read most of the source material. So
I've read virtually all of them except for The Wings. Apparently that was based on a book loosely, and Mutiny on the Bounty.
Right. Yeah.
Mutiny on the Bounty is based on a biography, but there's so many. I was just like, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, that I've read one of them.
There you go. You were more well versed probably in that than I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So there you go. So thanks for tuning in, guys. The next Best Picture winner is actually directed by one of the most influential and important filmmakers of the 20th century.
That's right.
So that one I've never heard of before. I am looking forward to watching it.
Hitchcock, right?
Yes. It was directed by Hitchcock. And I'm looking forward to watching the film, and I'm looking forward to reading the book it's based on.
Yeah, have fun with that.
Well, it's about 300 pages, so I think I can handle this
one.
That's
okay.
After Gone with the Wind, I think I can handle this one.
You could, yeah. Anything is fine after that.
Oh my God, you're just like Scarlett O'Hara. Once you go through that whole rigmarole of the war and whatnot, you become a stronger person at the end. But unlike her, I'm not racist, so I think I am a better person overall. But yeah, anyway, guys, thanks for tuning into this episode, and we'll be seeing you in the next one.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.